Hello, everyone. Welcome to Verlita's Everything in Between podcast. I am the creator and your host, Verlita Odom. I hope all has been well with each of you since we were together last. If you remember, on the last episode, we discussed hospital social work and the important role that the social worker plays when it comes to you or your loved one being hospitalized and needing assistance during your stay, and then also as you're preparing to discharge back home. On today's episode, I think you'll find the information helpful because we're going to continue to talk about the importance of the social worker, but this time in the setting of a nursing home. So if you are considering respite care or completing rehabilitation in a nursing home, or if you or a loved one are in need of long-term care, today's episode is going to provide you with some valuable information and again remind you that the social worker is just a key component to your time, whether it be respite, rehabilitation, or long-term care. Okay, so I'm going to let you know how I made the switch from hospital social work over to nursing home social work or long-term care social work, letting you know the importance or the important role that social worker plays and how helpful they can be to you and your family member. And then I'm going to give you a few first steps that you can take if you are considering nursing home placement for yourself or your family member. And again, that nursing home placement can be short-term for respite or therapy, or it could be for long-term care. So again, I hope you guys find the information helpful, and I'll see you all after the break. So I made the switch from working in a hospital setting over to working in long-term care after I had been a hospital social worker for about a year and a half. What I found was that I was drawn more to the patients who were there for a longer length of stay. So patients who would come in one day and then discharge in a couple of days, that's one thing. But the patients who were there for surgery and were doing skilled therapy on our skilled therapy floor, I tended to gravitate more towards them because they were there longer and I had an opportunity really to get to know them and their family members. So I just decided that, the nursing home setting would probably be a place I would want to be because those individuals are going to be there for a few weeks at least during their stay. If they're short term, they're going to be there, at least 2 to 3 weeks. And, if there's going to be a longer stay, they could be there permanently. So I just felt like that would be just the natural next step for me would be to go into nursing home setting. And so I did that. Long-term care and nursing home is basically the same thing. The nursing home serves a couple of purposes. Of course, you can go there for therapy, physical therapy, speech, occupational therapy, and then discharge back to the community, which is a short-term stay. Or you could, if you are a caregiver caring for a loved one, if you can pay for it privately, or if your insurance covers it, you can get respite care, which means that maybe you just need a break, or maybe you're going on vacation, and so and the person you're caring for is not able to go on that vacation with you. And again, maybe you're just a little tired or exhausted from providing the care. You can, if you have the money to pay privately, or if your insurance covers it, you can have your loved one go into a nursing home for a short stay. We call that a respite stay. Also, sometimes people end up needing to be there long term, permanently. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First, it's free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. That's pretty awesome. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other forums. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Whatever the reason may be for admission into a nursing facility, or nursing home facility, long-term care facility, the social worker's role is to help complete the admission paperwork, which includes social histories. And social histories are exactly what they sound like. They give us, background information on the new admission, or the new admit. So we are asking them questions like, when were you born, where were you born, how did you grow up. We're wanting to know things about their educational background, were they in the military, their career, family life, all of that. And that is to make sure that we are aware of who they are and the things they like their hobbies. If there's any mental health history, medications, those are things that the nursing staff are going to need to know in case during that stay something happens or there's an issue. We already know that there is an established, mental health issue, and maybe it's being exacerbated, and needs to be treated. We're making sure that they can continue treatment. Maybe there's a substance abuse history. They could be going through withdrawals if they recently used. So there's just a lot of information that you are able to glean from completing the social history, and they are required by the state. Um, they have to be completed. So we can have that in the resident chart. Okay. Again, it just helps us get to know the resident since they're new to the facility. And for the most part, they don't have a problem sharing information. Many of them enjoy the time and enjoy reflecting back on their life and sharing that information. So I've never really had a problem with anyone. Not a major problem. Every now and then you will get someone who just doesn't want to discuss or is just not very open with their history, and that's okay too, because you just complete what you can complete, and over time as you get to know them, they will usually disclose more information about themselves, and you can always revisit the social history and go and put that information in whenever you learn of new information. So the social worker, and you might also hear them called the director of social services or the social services director. Either way, regardless of the title, it is the facility social worker. Again, they're going to be completing the admission paperwork, which includes the social history. They're going to be completing the cognition and depression assessments. And if you listen to my last episode, I discussed that because that is really something that's pretty much universal. Whether you're in a hospital setting, or a nursing home setting, you're going to be assessing for cognition and for depression. As many of you know, depression is so prevalent. In our society, period, but definitely amongst the elderly, and particularly the elderly who reside in nursing homes. So we are definitely going to want to get a baseline on their cognition, um, and also whether or not there's any depression that's indicated via the assessment. The cognition portion of the assessment is really, like I said, trying to establish a baseline. So we are trying to see if are they alert and oriented. Do they know who they are, where they are? Do they know the month, the day of the week, the year? There's also a portion of the cognition assessment where you give them 3 words to remember at the beginning of the interview, and then toward the end, you ask them, to recall those 3 words. So that really helps the staff understand where they are baseline. And that way, as the assessments continue to be completed during the stay, if there's a change, it will send up red flags that, there's been a decline. And then you're going to want to know why is that decline there. So there are just some built-in measures that really do help track the residents, how they're doing cognitively, as well as in their emotions and mental health area. Okay. So the social worker is responsible responsible usually for completing those portions of the MDS assessment. And the social worker is also going to be scheduling and conducting the care plan meetings. And the care plan meetings are interdisciplinary meetings that are conducted periodically to discuss the resident's care plan or plan of care. And every single person in a nursing home facility has a plan of care. There's a 24-hour plan of care with the new admission, and then there's going to be one done within the first 14 days, and then they're going to continue to be done at day 30 and quarterly. And those are put on a schedule, and the social worker is usually the one responsible for scheduling, sending out the invitations to the meeting to the responsible party of the resident, making sure the resident is aware of that meeting as well. And again, it's interdisciplinary. So the nursing department, there's a representative there, the social workers present. There should be a nurse aide who's familiar with the resident that also is in on the meeting, and also the dietary manager. So that plan of care addresses all of those areas, from dietary needs to socialization needs, their medications, mental health needs, if there's any type of physical limitation that needs to be addressed. It's exactly what it sounds like. There is a plan of care laid out that needs to be followed, where we say these are the residents' needs and this is how we plan to meet those needs. And that plan of care is updated periodically. Okay. And definitely anytime there's any type of change or significant change in the patient's care. Okay. So that's one of the things that the social worker is responsible for. They're responsible for discharge planning, and that's the same as in a hospital setting as well, because everyone that comes into a nursing facility is not there long term. Okay. Like I said, they're there for respite care. Because the family needs a break in care, or they're going somewhere and the person can't go or doesn't want to go on vacation or take a trip somewhere, so they need relief. So, the patient's only there for a week or two. There's people who come into the nursing facility for the purposes of rehabilitation, and they're only going to, once they meet certain goals, they plan to discharge back home to the community. So the social worker is doing the same thing that the hospital social worker is doing. You are planning for discharge. You are setting up home health when they decide to go home. You are making any type of referrals to DME companies, making sure they have the equipment they need when they go home. It might be a rolling walker, a shower chair, a tub transfer bench. It could be a Hoyer lift. Whatever equipment that may be needed. The social worker is setting that up, and they're also making making sure that there's a continuation of services that were provided in the facility. So for instance, if they saw the podiatrist in the facility, you might want to continue to that patient may want to continue to see that podiatrist, and so you give that information, or you make the next appointment and they are instructed to follow up with the doctor. Okay. Which that really, a lot of the appointments, making sure they're set up, is done through nursing, but still the social worker wears many hats, and is involved in with every single department within the nursing facility. Okay. So again, you're making referrals on behalf of the residents when they're there. That's even if they're discharging to the community. But let's just say they're long term. There's been some mental health issues. Well, guess what? I mean, the residents are entitled to mental health treatment just like anyone would be in the community. So the social worker is making those referrals. There are mental health professionals who come into nursing facilities on a weekly basis and sit down and meet one-on-one with the resident who has a need for that particular kind of care. So the social worker is usually the one who will set that up. And that patient or that resident will continue psychotherapy with that professional, and that professional may make med recommendations to the medical director, and the medical director of the facility may approve those recommendations and start the patient or the resident on medications, or they may say, no, we don't want to try that. But it is important, if there is a mental health need, it is important that it's identified, um, and then services be set up or established for that person. And so the social worker is usually responsible for that, as well as other referrals for the patient or the resident. Just like if there's vision exams, the social worker is usually in charge of making sure the patients are seen for eye exams. Also, as I mentioned before, podiatry. There's usually a podiatrist that will come into the facility quarterly. So the social worker usually is in charge of that as well. And then, of course, assisting the resident with the transition from community to a nursing facility. That's a big transition. I mean, you have to put yourself in their shoes. If you have been living in your home, surrounded by your family or friends, your neighbors, surrounded by your possessions, and then all of a sudden you are no longer able to stay in that home because you're no longer safe, then you make that transition into a nursing facility. That is a big transition, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically. So the social worker is often called upon to, visit with that resident and assess how they're adjusting, and to make referrals if they're needed in order to assist with that transition. Um, and I will say this, I am a big advocate of people remaining in their homes as long as possible and as long as they're safe. Um, I understand that. I would want that for myself. Okay. But I do also understand that there may come a time where you're no longer safe in your home, maybe due to repeated falls, repeated injuries, a lack or inability to meet your own nutritional needs. So maybe, you can't cook anymore. Maybe you've had too many accidents in the kitchen. And just family is just no longer able, because many people have to work, of course. So sometimes their work schedule doesn't allow, and you're not able to visit and check in like you want to. So I'm a huge proponent of keeping someone in the home and in the community as long as possible, as long as they're able to be safe. And when that time comes, if that time comes and they're not able to be safe anymore, assisted living is always great, and that's for people who are fairly still independent. But nursing home placements for people who really need round the clock care, 24-hour care. That's what it's there for. So the social worker, if that's needed, will help the family and the resident make that transition. That is the role of a social worker in long-term care. And again, the social worker in any environment really does wear many hats, plays many roles. And just as in the hospital, the social worker can be your best friend in that setting, because they are usually very strong advocates for the resident and the family members. We are usually the people the family members feel comfortable coming to and discussing their concerns or asking questions, because there's not one department that the social worker is not connected to within that facility, whether it's administration, business office, activities, dietary. The social worker is usually in close contact and close communication with every single department within the nursing home facility or the nursing home setting. So find your social worker. They're going to be a big help to you. Okay, so what are the first steps you need to take if you or a loved one is in need of nursing home placement? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is to identify the facility you're interested in admitting to. So, and they're not all the same. If you're interested in knowing which facilities have the best surveys, that information is public. Every nursing home facility goes through an annual audit. Okay, and state surveyors come in, and they review every single department to make sure that everything and everyone is adhering to state and federal guidelines. How they how they fare on that survey is public information to you. You can go to the state website to look that up. And in addition, every facility is required to have their survey results kept in a binder, usually somewhere in the lobby or front desk area of the facility, so that the family members or patients or residents have access to those survey results. Okay. So if you kind of want to know which facilities are, the best of the best, going to the survey information is going to be an excellent start. Okay. Second, once you identify the facility or one or two facilities you're interested in, call that nursing home and you're going to ask to speak to the administrator or to their admissions director um, about admitting yourself or a family member to that facility. Sometimes the social worker is involved in the admission, answering those initial questions. Sometimes the business office manager is, but you're usually never going to go wrong by asking for the administrator. Okay. The administrator, because not all facilities have a director of admissions, so you're usually never going to go wrong when you ask to speak with the facilities administrator. And from there, the administrator may answer those questions or at least direct you to the department that you need to speak with in order to answer any questions that you might have in regards to admitting to the facility. And then ask to do a tour of the facility. I know COVID has changed a lot as far as tours. Um, but some facilities have virtual tours, so you may be able to do that. Okay, because it's definitely important to show up and to see how they are operating from day to day. Okay, before you admit. So set up a tour of the facility so you can see what it looks like. You can see how the staff kind of operates and conducts themselves throughout the facility. So that also helps. And again, if you decide that that is the facility you want to admit to, the admissions director, the administrator, they're going to direct you to definitely to the business office, and then you can set up arrangements whether it's going to be private pay for the stay or whether it's going to be paid for by your excuse me, by your insurance company. Okay, but you know, facilities operate by admitting patients. Okay, so they want your business. They want to provide care. So they're not going to turn you away unless they believe they cannot meet your need or your family members' needs. And of course, if there's not a payer source, they're not going to be able to admit you either. But the point is, it never hurts to call. It never hurts to ask questions. If there are concerns about whether or not you meet medical necessity to admit to the facility, if there are any questions about whether your insurance will cover it, they will be more than willing to help you sort through all of that. Okay, you just have to reach out. If you have any questions based on today's episode, please leave a voice message on Anchor or email me your question or comment to only1vlo2 at gmail.com. Again, that's only1vlo2 at gmail.com. If you enjoy listening to my podcast and you find it helpful, I would love to hear from you. So shoot me an email or leave a message for me, please. Also, you can show your support by donating weekly or monthly via the link that is provided for you. Or if you would like to give directly, you may do so via my Cash App, which is Elevated Faith, or my PayPal, which is Elevated Faith VO. Again, Cash App is Elevated Faith. PayPal is Elevated Faith VO. Thanks for listening, you guys. And until next time, be well.